Hello everyone and welcome to another Foul Original. This video was made in part thanks to the Foul Original people over on patreon.com/fouloriginal. Patreons get early access to all my videos ad-free before they go public on YouTube. More details will be at the end of the video. This week, we look at the final run-up to the Lockdown 2013 pay-per-view as part of the Aces and Eights storyline. Brisco and Garrett Bischoff had revealed themselves to be part of the club and turned on their former mentor Kurt Angle. Kurt would find the secret clubhouse and discover the identity of the vice president. The VP would reveal himself in the ring to be D'Lo Brown and steal Angle's thunder. The Lethal Lockdown match would see Team TNA come out the victors, but the biggest shock of them all would come in the main event. The leader and president of the Aces and Eights would reveal themselves to the world and shake TNA to its core. This is part 7 of the story of the Aces and Eights, the Lockdown 2013 Betrayal. The reveal of D'Lo Brown as the president of the Aces and Eights would stab a dagger into the heart of TNA. D'Lo Brown had rejoined TNA in September 2009 as a member of the backstage TNA office in real life. He and fellow wrestler Simon Dean would replace the outgoing BG James and Jim Cornette as backstage agents. His title of Head of Talent Development and Acquisitions meant that he would play a vital role in the TNA gut check. D'Lo would also act as a lead agent to help put together matches and work with the talent backstage. On the March 7th, 2013 episode of Impact Wrestling, just moments after the reveal of Brown, we would start a best-of-3 match series to determine if Team TNA or the Aces and Eights would get the man advantage at the upcoming Lockdown pay-per-view. Picking up where we left off last time, the unmasked D'Lo in a leather Aces and Eights cutoff was backstage firing up the gang and giving Dvon a final bit of encouragement before the first match. The first matchup was the Sergeant at Arms Dvon going up against the Icon Sting. The match would end after a fan at ringside interfered. They threw a beer into Sting's face to temporarily blind him. Dvon would take advantage and pin him to pick up the first win for the Aces and Eights. Next up in the best-of-3 series, we would have a tag team match between Team TNA and the Aces and Eights. The team of Samoa Joe and Magnus would face Doc and Garrett Bischoff. Joe and Magnus would win to even up the series 1-1. The final matchup would see James Storm face Mr. Anderson. The match would end after the Aces and Eights distracted Storm. Mr. Anderson would pin Storm to get the win for the club. This closed the series with 2 wins to 1 loss for the biker gang, and they would get the man advantage in Lethal Lockdown at the upcoming pay-per-view. Before the night ended, the now unmasked Vice President, D'Lo Brown, would lead the Aces and Eights out to the ring to meet TNA in a brawl to end the show. On March 10th, 2013, the Lockdown pay-per-view would see the Aces and Eights face off against TNA in 2 scheduled matches, a steel cage match and the Lethal Lockdown match. By the end of the night, this would change. First up, we would have former mentor Kurt Angle face former protege Brisco in a steel cage match. This match saw both men trying to take out their frustration on the other with no quick escape or interference for either. The match would end with Angle escaping while the referee was down and D'Lo Brown interfering to throw him back in. He then dragged Brisco out of the cage while the referee was still down and hid so the ref would give the win to Brisco. The Aces and Eights had their first win of the night. Later that same evening, the Aces and Eights, represented by Dvon, Doc, Mr. Anderson, Garrett Bischoff and Nux, would face Team TNA's Sting, James Storm, Magnus and Eric Young in the 5-on-5 Lethal Lockdown match. Both teams fought in an all-out war with the Aces and Eights, starting with a one-man advantage. The match would end when Eric Young would hit a flying elbow from the top of the cage onto Nux and pin him to get the win for Team TNA. TNA celebrated this win over the Aces and Eights, but even though they won this battle, they hadn't won the war. The main event of the night was a title match between TNA World Heavyweight Champion Jeff Hardy and Bully Ray. Bully had been given this title shot by Hulk after impressing his new father-in-law with his bravery against the Aces and Eights. As this was the Lockdown pay-per-view, the match took place in a steel cage as both men gave it their all to leave as champion. During the match, Brisco and Garrett Bischoff climbed the outside of the cage to interfere. Bully and Hardy would stop fighting each other and team up to fight them. Bully would tell Jeff to open the cage door and they would throw them both out, lock the cage behind them, and continue the match. Towards the end of the match, Hulk and Brooke Hogan would turn up at ringside to provide moral support for Bully. Hulk was on crutches after his last attack, and he and Brooke would cheer him on. Hulk would shout "Aces and Eights" to them both as 4 members of the gang would scale the outside of the cage to interfere again. Bully grabs his chain as he and Jeff stand back to back ready to fight them. Bully would stare at Dvon as he looked ready to jump onto him from the top turnbuckle. After a few moments, he would reach into his back pocket, pull out a ball-peen hammer, and toss it down to Bully Ray, who catches it. Hardy doesn't see this as he has his back to Bully and is focused on the members in the opposite corner. Bully motions to Mr. Anderson with the hammer and then out of nowhere hits Hardy on the back of the neck and head with the hammer. Hogan is screaming "no" on the outside as he starts to put the pieces together. Dvon walks over to Bully, gives him an Aces and Eights handshake, and Bully drops down to pin Hardy. The rest of the gang watch on, cheering, and force referee Earl Hebner to make the 3 count. Bully Ray had become the new TNA World Heavyweight Champion as Brooke Hogan cried on the outside in pure shock with Hulk. With the arena and commentary in shock over this, Bully would shout at Hulk and Brooke outside, saying they are nothing, and calls Hogan an old man. He grabs a mic and tells them he used Hogan and he screwed Brooke. Fans start throwing empty beer cans and trash into the cage. He dodges most of the incoming missiles, but he addresses the crowd again with, "But most of all, I fooled each and every one of you." Bully Ray finishes up with, "I'm Bully Ray, I am the president of the Aces and Eights, and I am the TNA World Heavyweight Champion." With this bombshell dropped, the show would end with the Aces and Eights being the real victors of the night. Everything up to this point was to become champion, and the higher power had been finally revealed. There had been a few mentions of a secret higher power in the Aces and Eights pulling the strings. At Lockdown 2013, this was revealed to be Bully Ray. He was the president of the Aces and Eights, and always had been. On the March 21st, 2022 Impact Wrestling, we would get a series of vignettes with Bully Ray throughout the night. He would explain what was really happening each week in the run-up to Lockdown 2013. The series of videos were then released individually on YouTube on the official Impact Wrestling channel in 5 parts. I've linked them in the description as they are well worth watching in full. The Aces and Eights had started at Bound for Glory attacking other members of the TNA roster during the tournament. Bully had been the one to pick the targets for the attacks to get into the final 2 of that tournament. Here, he would be defeated by Jeff Hardy, who went on to beat Austin Aries for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship at Bound for Glory 2012. Their plan A had failed, and the Aces and Eights would be locked out of the arena by Hulk, unable to interfere anymore. Bully had to think of a plan B, and this involved Brooke Hogan. Bully would get Joseph Parks kidnapped by the gang to use as bait to lure Hulk and Sting to the clubhouse. This was where a masked member of the Aces and Eights had challenged them and TNA to a match. 2 men from the Aces and Eights would meet 2 of Hulk's choosing, and if they won, the gang would get full access to the Impact Zone. Hogan would agree as long as he and Sting were let go and nobody hurt Joseph Parks. The man who had made that challenge was revealed to have been the Sergeant at Arms Dvon. Bully explained that Dvon had been discarded and ignored by Hogan, and nobody turns their back on his brother. This had led to Bully offering to team up with Sting against the gang, which Hogan would accept with a handshake in the ring. Bully and Sting had become good friends and bonded before that upcoming match. In the tag team match for access to the Impact Zone, it was Bully Ray who had been put through a table to lose the match for TNA. The Aces and Eights now had full access again to start targeting members of the roster without being locked out or stopped. After getting caught with Brooke Hogan by various members of the roster backstage, it was Austin Aries who would expose their secret relationship to both the World and Hulk. Bully says he knew how Hulk would react to his daughter bringing back a bad boy, and that every time her father said no, Brooke would get closer to Bully and say yes. He tells Hogan, "I was in, and there's nothing you could have done to stop it." He goes on to mention people who felt were wronged and why they joined the gang. Doc and Nux became the heart and soul of the gang and the big man enforcers. Garrett Bischoff had helped Hulk in a previous lockdown match, but had still been made to feel unworthy of his place in TNA. Wes Brisco had been made to start from the bottom and beg for a contract, even though his father Gerald Brisco and Uncle Jack Brisco had trained Hulk. Mr. Anderson had joined after being beaten down by the Aces and Eights, and no one from the TNA roster went to check on him. Bully asked his best friend Taz to join the gang to get a little leverage, and Taz's contract allowed him to be their mouthpiece on commentary. When Jeff was attacked before the UK tour after his TNA Heavyweight Championship match by a masked man, that man was actually Bully Ray. To get Wes Brisco a contract, Bully and the gang used Kurt Angle to vouch for Wes and fight for his contract with TNA officials backstage. Kurt would get Brisco a gut check match and would be the first man to win their gut check match. That match was against Garrett Bischoff, who we now know was a member of the club too. D'Lo Brown would fill in for Al Snow in that week's gut check decision, and Wes would get himself a contract with a yes from him and Taz. Once Bully had secured his title match against TNA Heavyweight Champion Jeff Hardy at Lockdown, he was the one who allowed Kurt to follow them to the clubhouse and reveal every other member of the Aces and Eights except for one, him. He talks about the wedding and how he took a beating from the Aces and Eights, that he had to take a few hits to get what they wanted. His anger at revenge on the club was only for show. When he faced Dvon in their one-on-one match, Dvon knew his role and part in the overall plan. With this, Dvon took a beating from Bully to keep everyone in the dark as per the plan. After this match, Bully would play up that he had an injury to garner a little more sympathy from Brooke. He even made sure that Hogan wasn't able to make the announcement of a new number one contender after the series of Impress Hulk Hogan matches by getting the club to interfere. This gave Brooke, now Bully's wife, a whole week to try and convince Hulk to choose Bully. 1 week later, Hogan would choose Bully as the number one contender to face Jeff Hardy for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Bully would play to Hulk's ego by asking him to join in a 3-on-3 tag match against the club in the main event. The 3-on-3 match had become a 3-on-2 after Hogan didn't show up. At the end of the match, Bully had the club drag out a beaten Hulk Hogan and a frightened Brooke Hogan. Sting had then been beaten down in the ring as an injured Bully had to go and look after his family. We now know that this was all orchestrated by Bully and it went to plan. He says, "For 9 months, you all got swindled. For 9 months, I pulled off the biggest con in professional wrestling history. Do you know who I am? I'm the president and leader of the Aces and Eights. No one can stop us, and no one will take my World Heavyweight Championship." Brooke Hogan would turn up later in the night to fulfill her role as the VP of the Knockouts division, not wanting to speak about the events from Lockdown. Brooke Hogan would come down to the ring to sign Taryn Terrell, who was at the time feuding with Gail Kim. Brooke would come down to give Terrell an active wrestler contract, which caused her to chase after Gail Kim. They would chase down to the backstage area as Brooke watched them leave. As they left the ring, Bully Ray would come through the crowd to step into the ring and make his way up to the entrance ramp to Brooke. Unnoticed, he would stand behind Brooke till she turned around to see him. He pointed at his wedding ring as she asked why he did this, as she loved him, and he says, "Till death do us part." He leaves up the entrance ramp saying she hates him as Bully stands firm watching her leave. With Bully Ray and the Aces and Eights holding the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, a new number one contender would have to be chosen. Hulk announced that there would be a fatal four-way match between members of Team TNA for a title shot. Samoa Joe, Magnus, Kurt Angle, and Jeff Hardy would face off in the main event, with Jeff winning and becoming the new number one contender. Fast forward to the April 11th, 2013 episode of Impact Wrestling, and Jeff would face Bully Ray in a Full Metal Mayhem match for the championship. In a backstage segment earlier that night, Bully would tell the rest of the gang that he wanted to do this on his own. He made them give their word that they would not interfere in the match. He wanted to prove to Hulk, Brooke, and everyone else that he could do this on his own. Full Metal Mayhem is similar to a tables, ladders and chairs match, where the title is held above the ring. There are various weapons around and in the ring to be used, and there are no disqualifications. The match would end with both men on the ladder when Bully pulls out his trusty hammer and hits Jeff in the head, knocking him off. Bully would bring down the title and win the match. Afterwards, the Aces and Eights would come into the ring to celebrate with Bully Ray, as he had now proven he didn't need their backup to win. The vice president of the Aces and Eights, D'Lo, had been instrumental in executing a lot of Bully Ray's plans by being part of the TNA office and backstage team. This didn't sit well with many of the TNA roster, and Kurt Angle would be the one to take the fight to him. On the May 2nd, 2013 episode of Impact Wrestling, D'Lo would face Kurt Angle in an I Quit match. Earlier on in the evening, Kurt had challenged any member of the Aces and Eights to a fight. Later that evening, backstage, Bully Ray would ask one of the club to accept that challenge. After a few members came forward to offer, D'Lo would interrupt to say it should be him, as he'd been the one to help the others beat Angle before. D'Lo guarantees victory, and Bully asks if he would swear his Aces and Eights colours on it. D'Lo accepts, and the match is made. Skipping ahead to the match, D'Lo would enter the ring first through the crowd to await Angle. Kurt would come out to a hometown pop, as Impact was in Pittsburgh that night. Angle would make his way to the ring, but before the match could start, D'Lo would grab a mic. He would tell Kurt that beating him wasn't enough, and that he needed to humiliate him. He wants to beat him in a match he's never been beaten in before. He tells Angle that this match is now an I Quit match, and asks Angle if he's good with that. Angle would nod his head and accept, as D'Lo hit him on the head with a microphone to start the match. As the match continued, we would see that Nux, Doc, Wes Brisco, Garrett Bischoff and Mr. Anderson were behind the guardrail at ringside watching on. Anderson would tell the rest of the club to keep back and let the vice president do this alone. The match would end when Kurt was able to reverse a powerbomb from D'Lo and give him an ankle lock, grapevining the leg and holding on tight. D'Lo would have no choice but to tap out and then say, "I quit." The members of the club at ringside would look on but not help D'Lo, as Mr. Anderson would motion for them to leave the arena and the vice president. Later that night, Bully would be furious as he got a report of the match. He couldn't believe that D'Lo had actually said "I quit" and said he'd deal with him next week. That next week would be full of intrigue for other reasons, as a wandering and lost Phenomenal One makes a choice of whether to join the club or TNA. But that's all we have for this time. Quick question, were you shocked by the loss of D'Lo Brown in his I Quit match and the club leaving him? Join us next time for the Aces and Eights Part 8, a phenomenal choice. This video was first available to all my Patreons 24 hours before it went live on YouTube ad-free. A special thank you to all my current Patreons, their names will be on the screen right now. If you would like to support this video and future series, then please go to patreon.com/FoulOriginal and become a FOP. Tiers start from $1 and they go towards getting more of these out to you. Like the video if you did, subscribe if you would, hit the bell notification if you please, and share this video if you can. This has been a Foul Original. Thanks for watching. See you next time.